Is it all caravanners who are cognitively impaired, or just the ones who commented yesterday? I mean, after yesterday's video, the conclusion is becoming fairly clear, and I think I finally know who's been buying all of that toilet paper recently. Details next. I'm John Cadogan from autoexpert.com.au, the place where Australian new car buyers save thousands off their brand new cars. Hit me up on the website for that. Captain's log, March 18, 2020. The zombie apocalypse has breached the containment facility we call Parliament House and become abruptly worse. Yesterday I answered Rob Benji's apparently straight-faced but nutbag question as to the viability of DIYing your own wind turbine in the shed for the caravan to cure the non-problem of the vehicle not being adequately able to recharge the caravan's battery. Yes. Pro tip, the vehicle's going to recharge it just fine. The problem does not friggin' exist. Just to get us all on the same page though, the solution here is fairly clear. Do nothing, because the vehicle's electrical system is going to cope. A DIY wind turbine is unworkably absurd. Simply plug in and recharge off the mains at home, and again when you get where you're going. There's a strategy. And if that doesn't work, add an additional battery or two and possibly some modest rooftop solar to the van, which seems eminently reasonable.
Here's hoping you were tongue-in-cheek about that fellow's question. Or are you under the misguided impression that anyone without a degree is a drooling, brainless mook? I've seen quite a few projects made up by idiot morons in their home shops that match anything made by much larger production shops and their engineers, and they work just fine, thank you. But I suppose that would discredit your degree.
When I think about that question, to me, I see someone who is overly touchy about not having a degree, and I would suggest that perhaps paying more attention at school would have been a good idea to anyone in that condition broadly. And I also see most probably a toilet paper hoarder, although I do not know that for sure. Christ's sake, where exactly did I say ever, did I hint ever, that anyone without a degree is, quote, a drooling, brainless mook? I think you're making that bit up, Troy, possibly because you are the drooling, brainless mook in this conversation. When did I categorise people with their own workshops as idiot morons, quote unquote? Never. I have the utmost respect for competent tradesmen, okay? I've met heaps of amazingly capable tradies, and I know enough about what they do, and I've stood using their machines long enough to know that they're a lot better at that shit than me, on the tools, okay? The chap whose question I answered yesterday, well, he was hell-bent on solving a problem that did not exist with a proposed solution that was literally nuts and unworkable. I will also freely admit that there are plenty of engineers out there who are totally impractical. I just don't happen to be one of them, okay? But for balance, I will also admit that there are plenty of dumb shits in society who could never understand engineering no matter how friggin' hard they tried, and who appear to think that less education is better than more. And I'm looking at you when I say that, Troy.
A turbine would increase fuel consumption due to the drag.
Yeah, absolutely. Aside from being huge and impractical and unworkable, doing this certainly would increase the fuel consumption. Big windmill on the roof, fuel consumption definitely on the way up. A lot of people pointed this out to me like, aha! And yet, to me, this is not the reason not to go ahead and fit that stupid windmill. Everything you employ the powertrain in a vehicle to do, such as drag a caravan sorry ass all over the friggin' country, or drive the alternator and the HVAC system, etc., drive a big windmill, whatever. It's going to use additional fuel, okay? Otherwise, you would have just invented a perpetual motion machine. Congratulations, I suppose, but you could therefore expect a warrant for your arrest to be issued by the local branch of the Thermodynamics Police. And now this from Weldon Thompson, who also suggested removing all of the van's external cladding to save weight and replacing it cleverly and innovatively entirely with laser-cut photovoltaic panels with excess power, even in moonlight, allegedly, and devoting that excess power to an ion thruster to prevent the death wobbles while in transit. I'm not making this up. In fact, I doubt I could. Mr. Thompson added,
Comment on the Techiel specs in video. 2.4 kilowatts equals 165 amps at 14.5 volts. Some vehicles may produce this, but a 2 litre. In the Miltari, we use a 24 volt 200 amp generator in some vehicles, and these we're at the size of a 10 litre drum.
Thank you very much, Weldon, for taking the time out of your busy day to reach out to me in this entertaining way. I'm always happy to debate anything Techiel with let's call you a visitor from the Miltari system. Welcome to Earth, and kindly do allow me to retort. What I actually said yesterday, dipshit, was that a 110 amp alternator delivering 110 amps, i.e. pumping out the full load at a nominal 12 volts, imposes about 2.4 kilowatts of drag on the engine. This is because the alternator is producing 110 amps times, let's say, 12 volts, equals about 1,320 watts of electrical output. But the alternator is obviously not 100% efficient, mate, and neither is the serpentine belt driving it, although those serpentine belts are pretty good. The system is about, let's call it, 55% efficient typically, and 1,320 watts divided by 55% equals 2.4 kilowatts. In other words, the engine needs to deliver 2.4 kilowatts to the alternator for the alternator to pump out 1,320 watts of electricity at its peak capacity, because you don't get anything for free and you don't even break even. That's what thermodynamics basically says. And one of the things that smart alternators do is not do all of that 110 amp maximum pumping out at idle, because it would severely impact the idle quality.
Many vans also have a TV, outdoor lights, low power microwave, laptops, etc. We aren't living in the dark ages, people have tech. That means the deep cycles are likely to be half or more drained by the morning on any given stop.
Yeah, agreed. So let's say your 120 amp hour battery is kind of half drained overnight and the charging circuit demands, 10 amps from the vehicle. That's a pretty conservative charging load. So you'd need to pump 60 amp hours into the battery to fully recharge it, okay? That's 6 hours running at 10 amps on the highway, or a modest rooftop solar panel.
Though I generally like your channel, I fail to understand why you belittle people asking questions of you in quite a polite manner, regardless of how bad the questions are. Do you get off on that behaviour?
Yeah, I do. I get right off on it. I mean, it gives me a stiffy every time, disgracefully enough. I don't know why, right? It just happens. Probably because it's actually not okay to be a complete dickhead if you're a grown man. That's definitely got something to do with it. Australia is already overstocked on grown-up dickheads, I think you'd agree, and which you might have noticed, especially recently. Scientific illiteracy is in plague proportions, which is evidenced by all of the zombie apocalypse preppers buying all of that toilet tissue right now. I mean, What exactly is the benefit?
Johnny should be encouraging scientific experimentation and not mucking it. 100 watts, you say. Maybe you forgot about the rice cooker, and don't forget the oven is on because they're cooking a roast. Sure, they can use gas, but maybe they want to use electricity because gas requires taking the bottle out and refilling it and all that good jazz. With their driving down the road, they want to take advantage of electrical energy, and I think that is quite fair logically.
Speaking of dickheads, coincidentally, scientific experimentation is totally fine. I'm all for it. Absolutely. Only fucking about aimlessly in one's shed, making a fan that will not work because it cannot hope to work, is not actually doing scientific research. So there's that. Also, on your correspondent, are you seriously suggesting cooking a roast in an oven, gas or electric, in the van while driving to your destination? You don't think that might be like, I don't know, a fire hazard? Having the oven on at 100 k's an hour with a big chunk of dead animal just dripping fat everywhere. You know, you hit a bump, fat goes everywhere. The element in an oven is actually well over the auto-ignition temperature of dripping. I'm just putting it out there, okay? Plus, who has a friggin' roast with rice? A caravan is a fairly high-priced box from which you have to decant your own shit from time to time, I'd suggest. Yes, must be one of the best things about caravanning. And in the context of doing that, okay, the uplifting nature of the post-ablution ablutions, percolating for a few days in the heat before finally being released. Filling the occasional gas bottle doesn't really seem that inconvenient, at least not to me. Plus, there's the energy density of gas, which murders electricity and makes it a far superior thermodynamic, chemistry, whatever, proposition for energy-dense processes such as cooking. Unfortunately, Darren here chose to go on.
Maybe it's cold outside and they have a 1200 watt heater keeping their van nice and warm. For the opposite, they're running the air conditioning so when they jump out they can go to their van and feel, oh, so cool. I think you've been a little hard on these people, John, especially when they're trying to understand more science.
Do allow me respectfully to disagree with you on this, Darren, because I'd say the tone and the manner of my responses is Goldilocks on this. A 1200 watt heater. That's fairly impractical, I'd suggest, electrically, unless you're, plugged into the mains or something. 1200 watts is 12 volts at 100 friggin' amps, so do be using the thick wire when you install that heater, won't you? It's about 1 hour's worth of runtime from quite a substantial deep cycle battery too, and that's only if you can control the temperature at that rate of discharge, and if you're not also running, the lights and your oven and your tech and your fucking rice cooker at the same time. But let's just say, to highlight your spectacular scientific imbecility, Darren, that your van has 1200 watts of heating or cooling capacity. Physics doesn't give a shit, it's all the same energy transfer, one way or the other. Heating or cooling, they're just flip sides, right? Plus, of course, let us assume that you also have magical miracle batteries direct from Elon Electric Jesus Musk that never run flat and don't actually blow up when you discharge them at a rate of 100 amps. So that's nice. A 15-foot van, okay, that's going to contain about 25 cubic metres of air. And brace for impact here because I have to do this with actual science, okay? Normally I try to avoid that, but unavoidable here. 25 cubic metres of air, that's 30 kilos of air, based on the density at average temperatures and pressures. It takes 1 kilojoule of energy to change the temperature of 1 kilo of air by 1 degree C. It's the simplest specific heat ever to remember. 1, okay? So if it's 50 degrees C in the van when you stop, or if it's minus 10 in the van when you stop, who gives a crap? And if you want the van to be at 20 degrees C, that's nice and comfortable, you have to change the temperature of the air by 30 degrees, one way or the other, okay? Hot or cold, doesn't matter. That's going to take about 13 minutes using a 1200 watt heat exchanger, a heater or an air conditioner, it doesn't matter. 13 minutes. It's actually 12 and a half, but hey, there might be some convection from outside to battle as well. So if you are driving down the highway friggin' endlessly with the air conditioning on or the friggin' heater in the van, just so that you can be comfy immediately upon arrival, that is beyond stupid. It's Scott Morrison stupid. It's going to take 13 minutes, mate. Why wouldn't you just drive an alternator off one of the caravan wheels if you really needed to charge your caravan battery while you drive? Jesus, Brian, I mean, just bolt some solar panels to the roof, dude. It's easier, they're going to be more reliable, and these will recharge the van even when you're not moving, son. Even for months on end when your caravan is parked out the front and making your fine domicile look like a proper third world slum. In the front yard like that, roasting away. Last comment in this report today goes to, as John Paul Young himself would have categorised him, yesterday's hero, who apparently has suddenly changed from windmill drive to axle-driven alternator in the shed. Who knew? I will probably build my alternator drive regardless of what John says. It costs me nothing to do in the shed, and if the idea works, bonus for me. If it doesn't, I might learn something from trying. There's an idea, Rob. I mean, a bad one, but you are a font of ideas. I'd suggest fit solar panels and a second battery, mate. It's that simple. I mean, if you really need a project and you want something viable, do that. That's a guaranteed success. But let us entertainingly detain ourselves somewhat briefly with the practicality of Rob's in-shed proposed axle warp drive alternator proposal. It's certainly possible to do this, just kind of stupid. You got to remember the whole axle doesn't spin, right? There's just a hub on bearings plus brakes down there. So physical space for access to the spinny bits of the setup is going to be kind of limited. The alternator in the car is run off the crankshaft of the engine by a serpentine belt, okay? And if that engine is doing 2,000 revs down the highway, the caravan's wheels are only going to be doing about 800 RPM, depending on their size, just a ballpark. So that means the drive pulley on the axle is going to have to be 2.5 times bigger than the one on the crank to achieve the same kind of gearing effect for the alternator. And I really doubt there's an elegant engineering solution for that within the available space, what with all the hardware down there and the limited number of things that actually spin, because the space is quite constrained, okay? And then there's this, okay, and I'm being quite serious here, the risk of catastrophic failure is high while you're on the move. And that is potentially very dangerous indeed, I think you'd agree, because it could damage the caravan's braking system or blow out a tyre. You don't want that at 100 k's an hour, okay? Prototype systems are prone to unexpected failures. It's in their nature, which is one of the curses of DIYing anything. Why you've got to be really conservative and over-engineer anything. And you've got to acknowledge that it's better to get a solution off the friggin' shelf, okay? Like those solar panels and a battery, which will work. It's great fun DIYing anything, right up to the point where it kills someone. Also, you might have noticed that the alternator is always up really high in the engine bay of the vehicle. And that gives it some degree of weather protection, doesn't it? Environmental security. How exactly are you going to protect an alternator from the water and the dust and the mud and the general filth that goes hand in hand with operating right down there near the caravan axles, okay? How are you going to keep it even reasonably dry, let alone get it out of all of that grit that's going to rip the pieces apart reasonably quickly? In closing, it's fair to say that there are no problems, only opportunities, and I can get on board with that, except that I think it's a bit of fundamental management bullshit, double talk, wankfest. So there's that. And this one certainly looks to me like an insurmountable opportunity. Yes, especially as it's a proposed fix for a problem that does not actually exist. So tell me, how would you handle this electrical deficiency that does not exist in your caravan? Let me know down there. And while you're at it, in the comments feed, tell me, are all caravanners this fundamentally impaired, like compared with all of those correspondents we've heard from today so entertainingly in the midst of the apocalypse? Are today's correspondents representative overall of the caravanning breed? Let me know. If they are, of course, I'm going to be real careful on the highway on a holiday weekend from now on. Not that I'm not generally, but, even more so. Is this a product, I wonder, of living for months at a time in an aluminium box that allows you fundamentally to take your own shit on an epic sightseeing tour of this fine nation, and in which the dunny doubles as the fifth seat at the dining table? Do tell me down there, because I'm looking, but I'm just not seeing the attraction.